If you've been using ediscovery software, you may have noticed that it is less stable than other software, non-ediscovery types. So for example, inventory management software, payroll management, I don't know, project tracking or something like that. And ediscovery software always has more problems with it. Things always need to be rebooted, things freeze, things like that. So today I want to talk about why that happens. There is a bug that's trying to land on a lens. What is wrong with you? Why are you trying to land? It's literally, whether you're using a cloud software or you have it installed in your data center or even running on your desktop, there always seem to be some kind of issues with ediscovery software. Something needs to be rebooted, something gets stuck, queries may be slow, something is locking up, you can't add a field, but you rarely experience similar problems with other software. So if you're working with like inventory tracking software, you scan a barcode, you enter a box, you scan something else, and you do it over and over, and it keeps going months after months after months without major problems, if maybe some Windows update got installed and server restarted or something like that. But as a normal course of action, most of the other applications, they just work without you needing to like reboot servers or optimize an index or something like that. So why is that? Problem number one has to do with data. The people who create the software don't know what kind of data you're going to be working with. So example of that would be, let's say we're processing an e-discovery software, or the software in general has to handle working with files. Well, you can have 20 kilobyte TIFF images or text files that it needs to copy, load, and process, or even like Word documents and Excel files. And on the other hand, users could have 10 to 15 gigabyte PST files that it has to handle. And as you can imagine, writing code that would handle really tiny files and really large files is very different, and it's kind of difficult. And we just don't know what data user is going to be putting into the system. The other example of this is metadata. We can have extracted text that is one text message long, just a few characters, or we could put a ginormous, like a system log that's like 500 megabytes. And both of those would go into the same field in a database. And designing a database that would handle really, really small fields efficiently, as well as the giant ones, very difficult. The other situation you may be familiar with is like PDFs with the author field or document extension. You know how document extension is usually 3 to 4 characters, but you get those situations where it's 200 characters because of some weird thing. And what users tend to do is, instead of saying, okay, this is a corrupt data, this is bad, they say, no, we need to jump that in. That information has to go in. We're not going to skip it. We're not going to ignore it. And same thing like the author in a PDF file, you could get super long strings because of something wonky happened with PDF. And users insist that, no, 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 this data has to go in. So we have a problem with designing fields for different sizes, just like we talked about handling file sizes. Now this is a problem with metadata we're loading into the database. Now, another reason is the rate of loading data into the system. When you use like an inventory tracking software, you add 1 box, 2 box, maybe 3, 5, and it's kind of consistent. Maybe a truck comes in and then you're scanning boxes with the barcode reader and it keeps adding them, something like that. With ediscovery, it's different. We either have no data being added or thousands of records, or even millions sometimes. So you may have, easy example would be an outside production. You get outside productions coming in, 5,000 rows, 10,000, 15, and then suddenly you get the one that's like 2 million, and then you dump all the data into a database at once, and of course the software doesn't like it. And the reason why software may not like it is when data gets loaded to a database, it doesn't just get copied and stored. Yeah, there are like transaction logs created, and then those transaction logs get committed, and different processes happen. And so when you gradually add records to a database, those processes normally happen, and then indexes being built, and everything happens at the gradual constant rate. When you dump lots of data at once, now you have to index all the data, now you have to do something else with all the data, and database gets sort of choked up on the huge amount of data that was thrown at it at once. And finally, we got to talk about optimization. Oftentimes, ediscovery software isn't optimized for how it's going to be used, but it's not a fault of the software developers. So one of the things in a standard software development that programmers do is they build a database, they deploy it to users, and then they evaluate how users are going to be using that software, and then they perform further optimization to that software. What we do in ediscovery is we allow users to do something that normally would never be allowed, which is creating your own fields. While it sounds like a normal thing you would do, it actually wouldn't be allowed with other software. And the reason for that, when you add fields, you have to optimize the database, how it's going to be used. So fields may need to be indexed, they may need to be set for certain length, and those decisions are not normally made by end users. They are made by database designers, and they have specifications, they have understanding how databases work, and they know what kind of data goes in there. And based on that, they make decisions. How to make fields, what data types they should be made, how they should be indexed, and so on. When we allow end users to do it, we are, I would say, breaking a pretty major rule of software development. And before you say I'm crazy, there are a few examples that I'm sure you're familiar with when a user does like a contains search on an extracted text field, and then that just winds up locking up the entire database. Or when there is an unindexed field, or like think of a concordance when you don't have a field marked as a key and you're trying to search for Bates numbers. Well, that causes a lot of problems too. And imagine you're trying to run like a query to find a bunch of Bates numbers. That's going to lock things up and cause all kinds of performance issues. Point is, the way users use the database needs to be evaluated by database administrators, and then the database needs to be tuned for what users are trying to do. And that never happens in ediscovery software, or at least not in the traditional software that we're using right now. And that's what makes ediscovery software less stable, in my opinion. It's unknown data, allowing end users who are not familiar with database design principles, create fields and manage it, and not having any kind of follow-up or monitoring of how the database is actually being used, and potential optimizations to queries aren't being done. All that contributes to ediscovery software crashing more often and being less performant than it could be. So that's my opinion on ediscovery software and why I think it's less stable than other applications we might be using. Let me know in the comment section if you agree, disagree, you have your own thoughts to share. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you next time.